Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be re-reviewing to you Sonic 3 and Knuckles, this time with video footage. This is one of those games that, despite it being usually the best Sonic game among most 2D Sonic fans' opinions, this is a game that Sega doesn't really like to port a whole lot. In fact, the only 3 times it's ever been ported on the Nintendo scene is on the Wii Virtual Console, which is no longer available through legal means, through the DS Classics Collection, and finally through Sonic Gems Collection. So, unless you can get your hands on one of those rarities, you're not going to be playing this masterpiece on a Nintendo system anytime soon. So, Sonic 3 and Knuckles hold a really special place among gaming history because Sega literally had to split it in half because it was so big, and because of the size of the project, they couldn't meet their deadline on time. So, what they did for the original Genesis version was they put Sonic the Hedgehog 3 on one cartridge. Then, a few months later, Sonic and Knuckles was released, but the top of the cartridge had an insert so that you could put other Sega Genesis cartridges on top of it. So in this particular review, we're going to be focusing on how the original Genesis version allowed you to plug Sonic 3 and Knuckles into the top of the cartridge so that you could literally experience these 2 separate games as the one giant masterpiece that Sega originally intended, with a few bonus features to make it feel like a complete package. For starters, in the original Sonic 3, you could only choose between Sonic, Tails, and Sonic and Tails working together. Or, in Sonic and Knuckles, you could only play as Sonic or Knuckles, each with separate campaigns. With Sonic 3 and Knuckles, you could play through the whole game as any of those combinations of characters. You also have the vastly superior music choices for some of the boss battles and Knuckles' theme throughout the adventure. And you can also save your progress. Now, you can't save anywhere you want, as in some virtual console ports, but you do at least save which zone you're on so that you can reset from the start of the first world course. They always have different names for levels throughout gaming history. Have you noticed that it was galaxies and galaxies and stages in Smash Brothers? Okay, rambling aside, another thing that sets Sonic 3 and Knuckles apart is that it actually gave players a reason to want to play as Sonic, because Tails can fly. So why wouldn't you want to fly through this stage? That would make you go a lot faster. And then there's Knuckles, who may not be able to jump as high as Sonic and Tails, but he can glide horizontally, and he can also break through certain walls that Sonic and Tails can't, and he can also climb up walls. So, Vanilla Sonic had to have a couple of tricks up his sleeve. For starters, if you press the jump button again while Sonic's in midair, he'll briefly flash white as though he's surrounded by lightning, and this is called the Insta-Shield. As evidenced by the name, it only lasts for about a second. But if you have split-second timing, you can get past a lot of enemies that are covered in spikes or electricity or fire and bypass waiting around for them to get into a state of weakness. This can really speed up the boss battles if you know what you're doing, but it also has a bit of a risk factor, as if you get it wrong, then you'll end up losing rings. There's also the fact that Sonic 3 introduced 3 new barriers as opposed to just the vanilla old shield that was in the previous 2 Sonic games. There's the fire barrier, which allows the characters to step on fire and lava, as well as endure enemy fire attacks without taking damage. The lightning barrier, which allows all rings to propel towards the character like a magnet. And the aqua barrier, which allows the party to breathe underwater indefinitely without having to worrying about that panicking, drowning music or trying to search frantically for air bubbles. In the case of Sonic, he gains an additional ability besides the Insta-Shield if you tap the jump button again. With the fire barrier, he can launch himself forward like a missile. With the lightning barrier, he can do a double jump, which I'm surprised wasn't in the main game to begin with, because most platformers nowadays have some kind of double jump mechanic. And with the aqua barrier, Sonic can bounce off of the ground like he's bouncing on a pogo stick. Gee, they sure love ripping off Scrooge McDuck, don't they? So overall, I think that not only does the game make it cooler to play as Sonic, but they even separate the story so that you see things from both Sonic's and Knuckles' point of view, with several areas in the original Sonic 3 being locked off, and the catch would be that you'd have to wait for Knuckles to be able to get through them. So this allowed for 2 completely separate playthroughs through the same levels. Now, in my personal opinion, I think Sega went a little bit biased towards the Sonic part of the story because Sonic's name is in the game, and in the case of Sonic and Knuckles, it's billed first. So it does feel like Sonic gets the more grand experience. Just to name a couple of examples, in Zone 5 of Sonic 3, Sonic gets to snowboard. Knuckles does nothing of the sort. Sonic also gets to go through the Death Egg at the end of Sonic and Knuckles. Knuckles just ends at the Sky Sanctuary, and even that, Sky Sanctuary is only a boss rush for him. It's not a full-on level to explore like it is for Sonic. So overall, I think Sonic and Knuckles are balanced out pretty well, and you might be thinking, well, Tails seems a bit overpowered if he can fly, but he only has so much stamina before he starts plummeting toward the ground, and you also can't correct your jump, so say if you're plummeting right into an enemy, there's really not any way to defend yourself. So each character has clear strengths and weaknesses, but I would definitely recommend playing as anyone but Knuckles if you want the full story experience, as even though this game doesn't really have any dialogue, it still manages to tell a compelling pantomime story, as you can clearly feel the characters' emotions and motivations. Even if you don't know word for word what's going on, you still at least get the basic gist of how they feel about each other and how they come to grow over the course of the adventure. Now, I'm not trying to claim that this is some kind of Ace Attorney or Zero Escape level plot, because it isn't. This was the early days of storytelling. But I think if the Mario games were to take this route, it would be a good compromise to how Shigeru Miyamoto doesn't really like stories, but how you can tell a story in a more indirect way. Also, Sonic 3 Knuckles has some amazing music. I'm not generally a fan of music that revolves around heavy synthesizers and MIDI, but the Sega Genesis couldn't really do anything else. And I think this is one of the best, if not the best, examples of how to get it right. In fact, this was done so well that Sonic Mania more or less copied this style. It feels like a lot of the songs just have so much attitude and fit perfectly with the atmosphere of the level, as opposed to the previous 2 Sonic games, which more or less they were focused on the music being good as opposed to being fitting for the environment. It truly feels like whatever music you're hearing fits with whatever it is that you're playing. And this also had a whole ton of composers working on it, including Michael Jackson. And you could say it kind of predated Super Smash Bros. Brawl having a ton of composers. Now, in terms of the gameplay, Sonic 3 and Knuckles is mostly still a masterpiece. However, say it with me, I stink at Sonic games. Of course, it's gonna have a plethora of frustrating moments that even my love of 2D Sonics can't entirely overcome. Sonic 3 also suffers from sometimes being so ambitious that its ideas seem cool at first, but then they don't play out very well. The Marble Garden Zone is just awful every way you look at it. It looks ugly, the music is probably the worst track in the game, and there's this annoying mechanic with spinning on a top where sometimes you have to press left to go right, and sometimes the top can fly, and it doesn't make a whole lot of logical sense. And even if you're not trying to think logically about everything, you're still gonna wonder, like, what the heck is Sonic doing? I told him to go right, why is he going left? So, it just seems to ignore basic game design principles of make sure that the player always feels in control when they have the controller in their hands. There's also the usual Sonic tropes that I don't think are ever going to go away. The fact that the characters move so fast means that the screen can't always keep up with them, so you constantly have to be running into enemies that you couldn't see coming, or pitfalls that were just off the screen. And this doesn't just have to be when things are fast, too. Like, I've encountered moments where the action is at a complete crawl, and I have to avoid a boss's attacks from the other side of the screen that it didn't scroll far enough for me to be able to see what was going on. Now, thankfully, this wasn't as much of an issue as it was playing this on the DS, but it was still enough of one where I wondered, if this game is ever re-released, I do hope they give it the widescreen treatment, assuming the GameCube version didn't already have it, because this looked totally fine on my 4K Ultra HD TV, but I also think that if there's a remake, they could really optimize how much is shown on the screen at a time if Sega is willing to put in the work. That being said, despite my minor gripes with Sonic the Hedgehog 3, it still remains my second favorite Sonic game next to Sonic Mania, and I think this proved the template for how Sonic Mania would be made, as well as something for Sonic Team to look back on and say, wow, how did we fall so far from when we created the ultimate 2D platformer that in some cases even gives Mario a run for his money. The graphics are quite amazing for the time. The story, while not mind-blowing, is a great way to tell a story without too much dialogue and world building. The music is fantastic and hummable. The GameCube version gives you the Michael Jackson version of some of the tracks, so you get a lot more, even more funky than what you're used to in Sonic games. And it controls really well with nice, simple one-button control schemes that just about anyone can pick up and play, but it offers some advanced skills such as the Insta-Shield for players that want to take their game a bit further and add more of a risk factor. So with that, while it may be hard to find nowadays on the Nintendo scene, I definitely think it's worth trekking down. Probably the DS version would be the cheapest, because DS games are a dime a dozen nowadays, but Sonic Gems Collection also lets you play it on a big screen TV, or Sonic Mega Collection lets you play it on a big screen TV. So whatever works for you, go for it. Both of them ought to be relatively cheap, so you shouldn't have too much trouble. Just make sure you have the right systems to do it. Or just play Sonic Mania, because that's much better than this. With that, thank you very much for watching. If I left anything out, or if you have any questions or concerns, please leave them in the comment section, and until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and let's hope that there's a Sonic Mania 2 that takes after this. Bye!